Perfect. Well, Gary, I saw your video on YouTube about the introduction of the new electric safari vehicles. Could you tell me a bit about your background and the inspiration behind the company?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm an absolute, that my happiest place has been in the bush. So I've been going to the bush, certainly religiously for the last 20, 25 years. And about 5 years ago, I was driving along and just got tired of the noise of a combustion engine. When you're sort of freewheeling, you can turn the engine off. You can just experience nature while you're driving along. And that got me going. At about the same time, a company in the States announced that they were going to bring the first ever 4x4 electric truck to the market. It was a company called Bollinger Motors. And I got really excited about that. And I said, well, this would be, ideal. We could get a 4x4 electric truck, put on a game viewing setup on the back, and we'd have the most perfect game viewing vehicle. Got me so excited, I went to Detroit and met with Robert Bollinger and started looking at, what his plans were when he'd have his product out. And it was imminent. In his mind, production was imminent, and we could look at importing these electric 4x4s that we could then, build a game viewer on. So that was where it started. But one thing led to another, and I soon realized that, the American auto market is very much a fake it until you make it. And they weren't forthcoming. It was, it'll be there, next quarter. After about 2 years, I said, no, we've got to do something else. And I started retrofitting Land Cruisers. There was a company that was doing it, and I bought into them, and we put an electric drivetrain into that vehicle and worked with it. But ideally, it's not, an existing ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle, is not really designed to have an electric drivetrain. You end up with the batteries too high, your center of mass goes. There's no real benefit in that. Plus, typically, the guys are looking at doing it on older models, and then they're creaky, and they've had a lot of wear and tear, and then the whole essence of being silent in the bush is taken over by an older subframe making noises. So that was the inspiration behind it. And about 2 years ago, I joined forces with BRV, as they were making really robust bakkies for the agricultural market. Strong, that got a unique suspension, which is really important in game viewing. You need a comfortable drive, particularly on the back. And I just said, what a perfect market. If we could re-engineer the chassis to put the batteries lower the center of gravity, and then put it what we had learned in the 3 years of developing the Land Cruiser conversion, it would be ideal. And that's kind of where we are today. That gives you
and the interesting frame, the BRV bakkies coming in at under $500,000. Real, they must have. How do you manage to source the product so cheaply? And obviously a great partner for you guys.
Yeah. So I mean, everything is made in Bloemfontein, just about. They get some of the key components like the axle, but the rest of it is just, handmade. They get steel in. They don't have, it's a very, I was going to say, I shouldn't say it, but a manual process. So there's not a huge amount of overhead in the actual production of the vehicle, which enables them, and it's almost counterproductive or counterintuitive, shall I say, is doing that. They're able to produce a real quality vehicle, handcrafted quality vehicle at quite a good price. Yeah.
Exactly. And if we look at the pricing, I'm presuming the EV is going to be more expensive. But what sort of price points are you expecting to come in on the Safari truck?
So we've kind of modeled it against if one went out and bought a top of the range cruiser, converted it to a game viewer, what it would cost to purchase and run the vehicle. And we wanted to come in less than that because that's what the sort of market standard is. So we're looking at 1.25 as a sale price for the vehicle.
That's right. And obviously with game park being very sunny areas in the solar, you can charge a car up between game drives and save a lot of money, I presume.
Absolutely. I mean, the running costs of an electric vehicle are a tenth of what that keeps changing as the petrol price goes, the diesel price. But it's typically 1/10 of the current running costs. And certainly from a maintenance perspective, just to give you an idea, the motor needs to be serviced every 250,000 miles. So that's 400,000 Ks, which is probably, I don't know, 15 years of game drive. Yeah.
And in terms of maintenance and after sales, who would be your partners that people can get the thing serviced with?
So typically the key components are the motor and the batteries. As we said, the motor needs to be serviced every 250,000 miles. So that's not even a consideration at this stage for us. The batteries themselves, which is another key component of it, it comes with a factory 7-year warranty, which means they certainly know that those batteries are going to last for 10 years. They also have a 3,000 cycle lifespan, which means from 100 to 0 is a full cycle. So that as well will take you, probably 15 years on that. The rest of the components that do go wrong, the shocks, sorry, there's somebody from Switzerland trying to get hold of me. I'll have to call him back. The shocks, we put in a standard D4D transfer case at the moment, and all those products are can be serviced by any garage, because you just need a good mechanic. You don't need someone who understands the engine or the batteries, because those will be maintained remotely by ourselves. Sorry, all our vehicles are connected into the cloud, so we can monitor the performance of the vehicle remotely. And the great thing about electric engines are they highly efficient. So if something's going wrong, if we suddenly see that there's a increased kilowatt output per kilometer, it can flag, and we'll be able to call the garage and say, listen, I think there's probably something mechanical. Have you checked your brakes? Have you checked any of the sort of normal wearing parts? Because we can see that you're consuming more energy than normal. So you can do a lot of preventative maintenance remotely. And typically, lodges will have their own on-site mechanics, or they'll have somebody that can do the basic stuff, because that's all they ever need to do. Shocks, brakes, those kind of things.
And in terms of shocks, brakes, and tires, I've seen a very rugged setup. What are some of the components you use?
So what's interesting, we've got a unique suspension that's been designed from off-road racing vehicles, so it makes it a lot more comfortable. But they're standard shocks with coil springs in the back. The IP is really in the design of how they mount on the vehicle. But those are the wearing parts that typically go, and they're nothing special. Gabriel, Munro, or any shock can be put in there, and typically the game lodges will have the expertise to do that. The tires, it's up to each game lodge. You can put whatever tires, obviously, if they fit the rim, what they're comfortable with, and they can source. So we haven't gone for anything bespoke or unique for our vehicle, because we know those are wearing parts, and typically game lodges may have, certain game lodges say we only want to use those tires for some reason. It's their choice. Yeah.
And what size rim are you going to put on is on the vehicle?
So it's a 17-inch, 17-inch rim. It's a big vehicle. It's if you see some of the pictures, it's quite an imposing. It's one of the things that we also wanted to do is game viewers. The higher you are, the greater the experience, because you can just see above the grasses during the wet season and stuff like that. So height is definitely an advantage in the bush, and we've designed the vehicle to be probably definitely higher than any other current game viewer.
Are you running 35s on the vehicle stock?
Yeah.
So that really does separate you from the pack in terms of off-road ability.
In terms of off-road ability, in terms of power, we'll get sort of 980 Newton meter, which typically, if you have a look at the Land Cruiser 4.2 pickup, which is the standard, they'll only get about 280 Newton meters of torque. Okay, so it really is, electric vehicles change off-road performance significantly. They've just got so much power, so much torque, that you can't compare them to the standard ICE vehicles that are in the field at the moment.
And what sort of a performance? I know you don't really use it on the Safari, but what sort of performance, 0 to 100 sort of top speed, can people in an overlanding expect?
So, and I say it tongue in cheek because there's no chance we'll ever go there. But again, being an electric motor, you can pretty much, it's binary. The only factor you have to consider in terms of speed is wind resistance. But the motor spec to drive that vehicle, now it's a 2.6 ton vehicle. It could drive that vehicle at 206 k's an hour. We've taken it to 135, and I just said, why would you be driving a game viewer beyond 135? So we've software limited, and that's a great thing about electric motors, is it's all driven by software. So we've pretty much governed it at 120 kilometers an hour.
And in terms of weight, I noticed with the Rivian, the weight was a major issue for stopping. How have you managed to keep it relatively light?
Funny enough, we haven't tried to keep it light. That to us in our, the Rivian and certainly all your electric manufacturers, because weight is directly proportional. Well, it would be directly proportional to performance in an electric motor. The heavier the vehicle, the less distance you can travel. That range anxiety is not an issue at all in terms of game drives. A typical game drive will be 27, the average is 27 kilometers. So we didn't really have to worry about weight. So much so that our vehicle has been built out of 1.6 millimeter mild steel. Now, you compare that to the soft aluminium bodies of the current 4x4s. Those vehicles will take a hit from a lead wood, or you could drive it off road, you could bash it through trees. It's certainly not going to make much of a dent on it. And the other thing is, even if it does, it is still old school enough that you can go and physically panel beat it back into shape. So we didn't we didn't look at trying to lightweight the vehicle. We will, I think, in due course, because it could give, more than the 175 kilometers that we can currently do on it. But typically our market doesn't require more than 175 kilometers. Yeah.
And I suppose braking distance is less of an issue in the bush at slower speeds.
Correct. We've certainly bulked up the braking, and we've got it from our bakkies because that's what we've always used. So we've got a good, we know we've got sufficient brake force to stop the vehicle. And it's limited at, as I said, we've limited to 120, but typically, in the bush, if you're traveling more than 40 k's an hour, you're not really experiencing the bush.
Exactly. And so would you recommend that the game parks charge them every second day? Because you wouldn't really need to charge them every day if you're only doing sort of 60 k's a day.
Correct. It'll be up to each game lodge. I mean, typically when I've taken it to the bush, it's as easy as you get back from your morning drive just to plug it in, and then you're going, you've got 100% when you leave again. So it really just becomes a habit of how you'll charge it. But you could theoretically go, 3 days without charging the vehicle. Our vehicle's currently up at Singita, and they haven't charged it for 3 days. So we did send them a polite reminder that you should probably keep it charged as much as you can, because you never know if there is that. Yeah.
In terms of battery life, is there a sweet spot for when you should be charging a percentage wise of usage?
No, most of the certainly the chemistry nowadays in these batteries, it doesn't need a sweet spot. It's not like, well, you should drain it to 22% and then take it to full charge again, and that's how the chemistry's actually got so good in the battery management system that those things are irrelevant.
Do you see any demand for putting bigger batteries in and overlanding with these vehicles?
So overlanding, obviously, as soon as you start looking at overlanding, you want to be doing, 500-600 k's on a full charge. Our feeling is that there's so much research and development in terms of battery technology that we will certainly be there in 3 to 4 years. We're going to have half the battery that's going to go twice the distance, and it's going to be half the weight. So these are, it's a moving target, and they're going to get better and better. But we've certainly looked at it and we said, well, that's never really going to play into our space in terms of game lodges, because they're never going to want to go more than the average of 27. So we've geared it, and we know that that'll be good now as it would be good in 2 years' time or 5 years' time, which is why we haven't looked at trying to convert currently our BRV bakkies into electric, because we know that there's still considerable changes that are going to happen in battery technology. And once we can get to the 500k mark easily, that's when we'll look at our BRV bakkies and converting them to electric.
Is there more than just a collaboration between the two companies? Is there an ownership sort of split?
Correct. We 50% partners with the BRV. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in terms of chassis development and aerodynamics and the crash ratings and all of that, and SABS, were you subject to all of those sort of things?
Yeah, we had to go through in order to get registered on the NATIS system. You have to go through all the SABS approval and get properly homologated, which we certainly have done, and we are on the NATIS system. Yeah. But
absolutely, and probably not also. Sorry, carry on, sir.
So quite a funny story, and talking about crash testing, when we were developing our first prototype and putting it together, we were working late through the evening on American time, because we've got the vehicle control unit is actually American software, and we needed to, refine a number of things. And all those, as I said, all those software parameters to how, when you can apply force to the drivetrain, etc., are quite sensitive. And we were working in the forward gear and making sure that we hadn't really adjusted the reverse. And from a mechanical point of view, we hadn't adjusted our brakes and bled the brakes quickly. So in our desire to show the factory what we had done, because we worked through the night, we decided to go and hide the vehicle around the back of the factory. And for the first time, we put it in reverse, and the vehicle just took off with an inability to stop it. And it went straight through a precast wall, the gate, everything we had. And that was our sort of crash testing that we did. And I'll show you, it probably made the slightest little dent in this 1.6 millimeter steel. And that's when we knew we've got a properly robust vehicle. The driver of the vehicle was a bit shaken. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Is there cash in transit opportunity with this vehicle for the fidelity guards?
Yeah. Well, it does look quite military if you have a look at it. It's got quite an aggressive, sexy look about it. Surprisingly, we've had interest from the Ugandan police force who are looking to upgrade their fleet. And a lot of they're using, the standard Ford Ranger, that kind of thing. They're all starting to look the same. And they're just saying this doesn't really give us it doesn't give you an aggressive look in the field. So we have had interest outside of like game viewing, not quite as hard as the cash and transit business, but certainly we've had paramilitary interest. Yeah.
You can certainly outrun the competition.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear that there's a lot of local beneficiation in terms of the actual manufacturing of the product. That must be a key selling point for you.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm certainly, and again, just in my other business, just proudly South African, and we've got to be able to showcase what we do in South Africa. We had the opportunity to import the battery management system is actually a key component to any electric vehicle, and we were working with an American BMS company, and we said no. There was the Joule. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Joule, which was the South African.
Correct.
Yeah. That was a South African electric vehicle that they built in, I think it was 2012. And it was really ahead of its time. It was unbelievably, it was ahead of their time and really good. And we found the guys that did the battery management on that. And they're still based in Cape Town, a company called Balance Cell. And we've been working with Balance Cell to perfect our technology and our battery management system here. So certainly, as much as we can, we want it to be South African produced. Obviously, the cells are produced in China, but we actually build the batteries and put the battery management system here in Cape Town and ship them to Bloem. And certainly all the body parts, the grill manufacture, everything that you could think of, we build here in Bloem. So very much a South African product, and proud to be South African.
I'm surprised that the bakkies don't get more publicity, because there's been this big demand for proudly South African bakkie for many decades.
Yeah, I think the issue has been the company has certainly struggled with production, and COVID hit them really badly when it was announced that you weren't allowed to sell a vehicle in South Africa. I don't know if you recall, but vehicle sales were banned in April, May, the first part of COVID. and that's really hurt this business significantly. But I think we're certainly starting to see the demand pick up as we've picked up our marketing, and certainly as this electric offering has got into the mainstream media, there's been significant interest in the bakkie. But as I was saying, that the problem has been capacity in building it. So they've only really had a factory able to build probably between 4 and 6 bakkies a month, which is not really going to get you into any mainstream. We've taken on new premises just around the corner here, and we put in about another 3,500 square meters of factory space, and that'll get us to anywhere between 20 and 40 vehicles a month, which is where we want to be.
And that gets you into the conversation.
Yeah, that's certainly.
I suppose you can't really divulge it, but are some of the bigger players, the bigger car companies, sniffing around, possibly buying you out to get that IP?
No, not yet. Yeah, I still think in terms of numbers, we're 10,000 bakkies are sold a month in South Africa. So producing 20 or 40 is really not gonna impact that market significantly. Yeah, we're gonna remain quite niched, I feel.
Yeah. Well, unless Mr. Putin carries on his nonsense, then with the petrol price going up, it plays into your hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we may be is the first to be able to produce an electric commercial consumer vehicle, definitely.
Anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on the new F-150 Lightning?
I mean, I think it's a fantastic vehicle. I think, most of the big players have had electric. I mean, they've had the ability to produce an electric vehicle for the last, I don't know, certainly the last 15 years. If you think of South Africa, here's a bit of history. South Africa produced the first electric game viewer in 1994. So in terms of electric knowledge and ability, it's been around for a considerable amount of time. And I think Ford, all these major automotive companies have the technology, but they've just kept it back. I think the fact that Rivian have gone into big production has forced Ford's hand, and that's why they've come up with the F-150, and it'll be a great vehicle. Yeah.
Exactly. And the other part of your business, the solar part of your business, how's that going?
So the solar part, so the two go hand in hand, and it's a bit like Tesla's model was mobility, power generation, and power storage. And we've sort of followed a similar track. And the solar and electric vehicles are quite connected, because if you think that the battery in any one of our vehicles is enough to run a mid-sized lodge. So you need the same kind of thought process around the power consumption and power usage of a vehicle than you do the lodge. And that's why we're looking at bidirectional units in our vehicles. So if a lodge does potentially go lose Eskom for load shedding or any other reason, that they could technically plug their vehicle in and run their lodge from their vehicle. Obviously, that creates problems if they're using it for game viewing, etc., etc. But the solar business has gone well. We've got 2 big installations. We did a berry farm up in Madikwe, and we've done a large warehouse in Johannesburg. And it's just a slow process. Yeah, but it's got off the ground well.
And, wind versus solar in terms of production and environmental impact.
So our focus has been pretty much solar, in terms of the areas that we operate in are, it's not like PE, and we're not looking at specific geographic sites that are suited to wind. But certainly wind, I think, is a fantastic renewable resource if you've got the correct climate for it.
As long as you're not a bird.
Yeah.
And in terms of recycling of batteries, how much of those are able to be recycled these days?
So certainly the lithium iron phosphates, there are a number of places that look at recycling. Our horizon for recycling batteries will be in 10, 15 years' time. So anything that we're doing now is only probably going to need to be recycled. And there's been significant development as people have seen the need to recycle these elements, because you don't have an infinite supply of cobalt. So they're looking to see how can we recycle and take those elements out of the batteries and repurpose them later.
Is your battery a lithium ion battery?
No, we've used the Lipo 4, which is a lithium iron phosphate. That's IRON instead of ION. And the reason we chose that particularly for our application, it's a more stable technology, a more stable chemistry. It has a much higher ambient temperature it can operate in. And considering we're in Africa and we're in remote parts, we've had interest from the likes of the Kalahari, where, it can get 45 degrees off just off the sand tracks that you're running on. You want a stable chemistry, and lithium ion, that's ION, which is the standard, Tesla type batteries, just don't have that ambient temperature range that we feel would be, adequate for us.
It's very interesting. My son's got a Lipo 2 in his remote control car. And I noticed they stay very cool. So you're saying it's a safer battery then?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of, if you take a lithium ion up to 60, 65 degrees, it's gonna get unstable, and the potential for a thermal runaway. And one of these, issues is these things are, once you have a thermal runaway, it's exothermic. It creates its own heat. You can't put it out. You can douse it with you can't starve it of oxygen. It'll just carry on burning. So it really is a safety issue. Yeah.
So why aren't these other guys using the Lipo?
Sorry?
So why doesn't Tesla use a Lipo instead if it can handle hotter, more difficult conditions?
So I mean, there's two things of that. I mean, if you design your cooling systems and stuff like that, you can stabilize the temperature that it operates in. And there's no doubt, in terms of energy density, you have far greater energy in a lithium ion than a LiFePO. So you've got to have those factors. And we said, well, it really wasn't important for us. We don't have range anxiety. We could use a less dense battery that'll give us, longer range. We don't have to worry about those things. Because there are advantages of lithium ion, definitely. I mean, Elon's no fool. Yeah.
And in terms of chassis development, again, how did the Grenadier had to navigate some IP with a 110? Did you run into? How did you design the thing so you didn't run into any legal issues with other previous brands?
Well, the good thing is we didn't copy anything. We started from a clean slate and developed, and certainly our chassis and our suspension is uniquely ours, and it's not being copied from anything else. We didn't take like a 110 and just try redevelop around it. Yeah. Yeah.
And what are some of the things that would you say is better in this truck that you've seen some errors in other trucks over the years?
So certainly, without a doubt, is the suspension is unique, and we've had guys, and I can't mention their current fleet, but they in the Maluti Mountains. They said they burned through their trucks in a year and a half. They've absolutely toast, and they got to replace them because they're doing heavy loads in the mountains, up and down on terrible roads, and their vehicles don't last. We've had a number of our vehicles there that have lasted 4 years, and they're looking at moving the entire fleet, and that's really based on our suspension and how it handles the off-road environment. So that's definitely something that's quite unique. I think the other thing, and I've mentioned it before, is the robustness, the actual toughness, the fact that it's 1.6 millimeter steel lends itself to an off-road vehicle. These game drives, when they've either been chased by something or they're moving through the bush trying to find a kill that's off-road, and they're knocking through trees and going through ditches and dongas. Yeah, having a vehicle that can take a pounding is, definitely an advantage. So those are the key things that I think separates us from the opposition. The fact that we've got a higher vehicle, and then the fact that we've got something that's built. I'm talking about our EV game viewer that's built as an EV from the ground up. So the center of gravity, we can build the batteries into the chassis. So it's a much safer vehicle to drive. If you get chased by an elephant, which I have been on occasion, you want the vehicle still to perform significantly well. Whereas if you've mounted all the batteries above the engine in the high part of the bonnet, the way conversions for Land Cruisers and Land Rovers are done, you do tend to change the center of gravity on that vehicle, and it doesn't drive, and I'll say this openly, it doesn't drive as safely.
See this, you don't really see there's a demand for changing existing vehicles. You should rather just start from scratch for safety.
You've got nowhere really to put your batteries. You've got to make a plan with it. You've got to shoehorn everything into where it should be. The beauty about a good EV, and I talk specifically about game drive vehicles, is now we have the whole bonnet area as storage. So you can put in your chairs, your tables, your cooler box. You can put all those things in an area where currently you can't. Now, if you convert an existing vehicle, you've got the same problem, because where your engine was, you're now going to put batteries. So those kind of things just make it, building a vehicle from ground up, designed for the electric drivetrain, is just I don't see the sense in doing it any other way.
It doesn't sound like you got any excuse for warm beers on the game drive.
Absolutely not. But what we've been asked, and this is what we're going to put in our models is moving forward, is plumbing an espresso machine. These are top end lodges. They want decent coffee. You've got this enormous power bank that you're driving around that can run a house. So why not just have one espresso machine or a decent ice cold fridge plumbed into and built into the vehicle?
Speaking of running a house, in terms of load shedding, can you plug this vehicle as a backup power source for your house?
Absolutely. We've sort of looked at the bi-directional charging units specifically for that purpose.
Absolutely. Is there any chance you can just give me a quick view of the factory if you've got time,
Sure.
sir?
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. I got the camera back on. It's
There
going to
we
be,
go.
yeah, it's going to be noisy. We're walking into the factory now, and I'll try to show you the vehicles as we go. So this is the
Sure,
current vehicle that's going out to I don't know if you can, that's going to
I can
Wild.
see that.
You can see there's just wires and bits and pieces. Yeah.
Where's this one headed to? Wild something?
Sorry, what was that, Greg?
Where's this vehicle? Where's the customer? Where's this vehicle headed to?
This one is going to Wild Earth TV. So
Okay.
on channel 184 in probably 2 weeks' time.
They must love these quiet vehicles.
Sorry?
They must love the quietness of this vehicle.
Oh, yes, yeah, because obviously all their filming, they don't have to worry about sound dampening and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
And they can charge their cameras while they go.
Correct. So there's a lot of value, yeah, for that. So I'll show
I
you.
mean, we've got serious ground clearance here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can see, I don't know if you can see there, it's certainly got way more ground clearance than any other vehicle. Yeah.
Does it have portal axles or the normal ones?
Sorry, Greg?
You know the port, does it have the raised axles for extra ground clearance?
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah, we've certainly.
So we're probably looking at like 400 moles clearance there.
Yeah, I'll get the exact specs for you, but it is significant. Yeah. I'll show you more around the factory. This vehicle here is we're just doing a custom V8 for, one of our clients, but this is normal. This is a petrol vehicle. These are the standard. This is the standard diesel vehicle we're working with here. This is going to a client out in Boston.
And you went for the 3.2, and you went for the 2.8 Cummins, which is a bulletproof engine.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we've just had Cummins certify these vehicles, so it can be any certified Cummins dealership can service these vehicles for us. Yeah. So that's what we've got in the factory. The rest is, normal. You can see it's currently we're trying to work in a very confined space, which is why we've struggled to produce the number of vehicles we have. That's our sticking room. As we got other vehicles, we still got to get out.
Is this a new facility, or are you still moving into that?
This is the old facility, which is why it's so, it's so higgledy-piggledy. Yeah, we are building the chassis for the next vehicles we're getting out. Yeah. But you can see it doesn't really have a good factory flow, which is why we needed the new vehicle. Because typically you should move from here on a line. You've built the chassis, and then it moves through into painting, then more body shop, final painting, and then through to assembly. And you should have proper production lines. Whereas we do the chassis there, we do some components here, we do some body work and sticking here. So it really is quite problematic. Yeah. Yeah, and then we've got to.
How big do you think you can scale this business?
Here's the roof that we're bringing for that. That's for the Wilder TV.
Looks very strong.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the factory.
How big do you think you can scale the company?
To go 20 to 40 cars a month by next year. Yeah. So we're hoping to scale.
And then I guess from there the sky's the limit.
I missed you, Greg.
Well, once you're hitting 40 cars a month, then the sky's the limit from there.
No, exactly. You know, once we get those sort of numbers in, we'll obviously be able to escalate further. Because I think if you get to 40 a month, you've got enough to do all sorts of other things. And then we've designed the factory that it should be easily replicatable. So if demand does improve, then it's going to be a case of, well, let's just double up and replicate what we've got.
It's an extremely eye-catching vehicle. I can see it in a music video or something, and then just going viral.
No, we've had.
Do you have any rappers ordering them?
Yeah, you need a good rap song and somebody doing it. But what's been amazing is I thought that, you know, being electric and the suspension and this, that, yeah, the biggest compliment we've had is the look of the vehicle. Yeah, as much as I try to sell it's robust and it's soft and it's quiet and it's this, that, the most common comment to me has been, shit, it looks good. Yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of the manufacturers are bringing out a product with sort of highway tires, not the right suspension, but you coming out of the blocks with it as it should be for the bush.
Yeah. And a lot of what because there's no global manufacturer. I'm talking the sort of the big names, the Land Rovers, the Toyotas, the Nissans, the Fords, etc. None of them actually bring out a safari vehicle. So you actually end up having to buy a vehicle that's got air conditioning, electric windows, a roof, etc. And then they throw it all away. You know, they cut it up. It's not usable. So ours has really been designed from ground up as a bush vehicle.
Why do you think Land Rover has gone completely the other direction and now the new Defender is like a Range Rover?
There's no word.
Business. Good for your business, sir.
Yeah, no, great for ours. But I mean, that was their market, you know, that iconic Land Rover look, and they just seem to. And I think that's why the Ineos Grenadier may do well. Yeah.
But but I've seen it critiqued a bit, and it's not quite as tough as people think it is.
I wouldn't know. I haven't driven one. I missed the launch. They launched it they had it here in South Africa. Yeah. But I haven't
a BMW gearbox and engine. And the ground clearance is not great, but other than that it's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, time will tell. Well, thanks very much for your time, sir. Very insightful interview.
Brilliant. Fantastic, Greg. If you have any questions, just shout.